Good afternoon, this is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding, here to discuss the basics of what do you do if you got hit with a penalty or you're going to file late and you want to show reasonable cause and not willful neglect to avoid, abate, or remove those IRS penalties. The IRS likes to issue penalties, especially in the world of international tax, which is what we specialize in here. International information reporting penalties are all the rave with the IRS, and so it's important to, if you got hit with a penalty or you think you may, that you do everything you can to present the best type of reasonable cause situation that you can. There's a bunch of garbage, junk you'll find online. Always be sure that you work with a board certified specialist. At least you know that they have an idea of what they're doing. They're not just puffing online, right? Let's go through the basics of the most common scenario that tends to result in the largest penalty. So Frank is a permanent resident. He lives in the U.S. He graduates medical school. Yay. Good job, Frank. And his parents are non-resident aliens, and they go, well, Frank, if you're going to stay in the U.S., they're wealthy, and they want to buy Frank a house, and Frank can't qualify for a mortgage here. So they gift him $1 million, and Frank is thankful. Frank does some quick research online and finds, hey, it's not taxable because it's a gift. It's not real estate, which is the exception to gifts not being taxable up front when they're received from non-resident aliens. So he thinks nothing of it, buys his home. Time goes on, builds up his practice. He has to go to his CPA, and the CPA is like, hey, you know, a few years back when you received that gift, yeah, it's not taxable, but it's reportable. They go and they submit Form 3520, which is what's used to report large foreign gifts, or large gifts from foreign persons, excuse me, and nothing happens. For a year or two, they think everything's golden, and then Frank gets a penalty for $250,000, which represents a 5% penalty per month up to the maximum penalty of 25%. So Frank wants to try to get this penalty removed, right? And so what he has to do is show reasonable cause and not willful neglect. And there's no bright line test, you know, factor A takes you to factor B, takes you to factor C. Like if you're doing the earned income credit or something like that, there's specific questions you go through. It's not like that. When it's reasonable cause, it's more kind of nebulous. You got to show a totality of the circumstance. Look at everything that Frank has going on at that time to try to take the position that the non-compliance was due to reasonable cause. Two very important distinctions to make, or one key distinction about two commonalities, okay? If you go to a tax professional and that tax professional tells you you don't need to file because of X, Y, Z, and you go, great, and then you get hit with a penalty, you can typically use that as a strong factor to show reasonable cause. The world doesn't require Frank to get 7 different second opinions, right? You go to someone who represents that they're a professional, that they specialize, this is what they do. You got the wrong advice, you relied on it, that's typically going to be sufficient. But if kind of like an inverse, right? If you have someone who's going to file for you, like an agent, and that agent messes it up, well, then that doesn't necessarily absolve the taxpayer from the penalty. So you go to some attorney and the attorney is handling your case, or a tax professional, and you go, hey, is it going to be filed soon? And they go, yeah, and you sign it and you give it to them, and you follow up a few times because you're diligent, right? And then you find you get a penalty and you're like, what's this? And it turns out that the firm filed it late. Well, the fact that you relied on the firm and the firm filed it late is not necessarily reasonable cause. Now, since it's a nebulous type of test, right? The totality of the circumstance, maybe that's one factor that goes with other factors, but it's not in and of itself really going to be reasonable cause. Since there's no specific bright line test, what a lot of people will do is they refer to the Internal Revenue Manual. It's a manual designed for IRS personnel to get an idea of how to handle certain cases. And while they're not bound to it and it's not force of law, it gives, excuse me, it gives taxpayers, tax professionals an idea of how the IRS may act in certain situations. You know, your common questions: what happened, when, why, how, you know, what kind of research did Frank do? Who did he speak to before he filed? Was he able to get the information? And other types of situations, maybe someone didn't even know that they have foreign accounts. This is very common in Asian countries where they use things like a CHOP, and the parents, it's got your signature, and they're out there opening accounts left and right, doing things where you have no idea here in the US. I mean, why was it not filed? And then the next key point is, what did the person do after they learned about it? Just learned to have foreign accounts. What do? Hopped on the phone, retained a specialist, submitted a voluntary disclosure, streamlined, whatnot. Or, just learned that I received a gift, learned that the gift should have been reported. What did they do? Well, they went out and they submitted a thorough, reasonable cause submission along with a 3520. What did you do? You'll find in a lot of the reasonable cause cases that end up the taxpayer ahead of the game is because when they learned about the non-compliance, they took care of the non-compliance. If you're out of compliance and you haven't received the penalty yet, the voluntary offshore disclosure programs are great. If you're willful or you can't certify under penalty of perjury that you're non-willful, that's not going to qualify for reasonable cause, then you have to do voluntary disclosure. Otherwise, if you're non-willful, there's various programs available. There is the streamlined foreign offshore procedures, streamlined domestic offshore procedures, delinquency procedures, which were modified November of 2020, and reasonable cause. You can always, we have lots of free information available on our main website. You can always reach out and schedule a reduced fee initial consultation if you think it's appropriate to your matter and something that we handle here. Again, my name is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.